All right, take a seat anywhere, please. All right. And be seated, please. All right, good afternoon, everyone. First of all, can you all hear me? Give me a thumbs up if you can hear me. Excellent. Well, my name is Pete Cahill, and I'm one of the judges of the District Court, and you have been summoned as potential jurors in the case of State of Minnesota versus Derek Chauvin, which is a criminal case related to the death of George Floyd on May 25th, 2020. A person charged with a crime has a right to a fair trial before an impartial judge and an impartial jury. In order to make sure that jurors who are selected are impartial, the law provides that the court and the attorneys for the parties may ask questions to all prospective jurors, which must be answered under oath. First, thank you for filling out and returning the questionnaire that we mailed to you. That gives us a lot of information to start with. Now, your contribution to the important and serious matter at hand is best served by continuing to provide full, complete, and honest answers to the questions that you'll be asked today. Those questions that are going to be asked will follow up on issues in the questionnaire, but it also might cover other topics as well. Now, after the questioning is over, the attorneys will have the right to excuse some of you from service on this jury, and I may excuse others of you for what is called cause. In either case, it does not mean that you are not a fair person and you should not take offense in being excused. I also ask that you not take any offense at any question that you might be asked. We must pry, to some extent, in order to explore some opinions you might hold and hear about experiences that you've had that might affect your ability to serve on this case. Now, the defendant, Mr. Chauvin, has been charged with murder in the second degree and manslaughter in the second degree. In the normal course of the trial, charges may be added or subtracted from these charges, but those are the charges as it stands today. To the charges, the defendant has entered a plea of not guilty, which is a denial of each and every material allegation in the charges. I'm now going to have the participants in the case introduce themselves so we can ask you if you have any relationship with them, either a friendship, acquaintanceship, or professional relationship. Beginning with the state.
Thank you. Good afternoon. My name is Steve Slisher, represent the state of Minnesota.
Hello, my name is Christina Marinakis, and I'm assisting with the prosecution.
Hi, I'm Joshua Larson, also representing the state of Minnesota.
Good afternoon, Aaron Eldridge for the state of Minnesota.
And Mr. Nelson, if you could introduce yourself and your client.
Good afternoon. My name is Eric Nelson. Along with Christina Voss, we represent the defendant, Derek Chauvin.
Thank you. Does anybody on the panel know any of the people who just introduced themselves? Seeing no hands. Do you recognize anybody in the courtroom? And by recognize, I mean have some kind of acquaintanceship, friendship, professional relationship. All right, no hands. You have been given a list of potential witnesses. I'd like you to review that before you are questioned individually if you have not done so already. You'll be asked if you know anyone who is on that list. Now, one of the things the attorneys may not do during jury selection is to instruct you on the law, but I do want you to be aware of some of the basic concepts that apply in all criminal cases so that you may keep them in mind as you answer the court's and the attorney's questions. So, I will instruct you as follows. First, the charges against the defendant are not evidence, and they create no inference of guilt. No member of this jury should in any way permit himself or herself to be prejudiced against the defendant because a charge has been made against him or because he has been placed on trial. The defendant is presumed innocent of the charges made against him, and in order for you to find the defendant guilty, the state must prove guilt beyond a reasonable doubt. The defendant does not have to prove his innocence. The presumption of innocence remains with the defendant throughout the trial unless and until he has been proven guilty beyond a reasonable doubt according to the law and the evidence admitted at trial. Proof beyond a reasonable doubt is such proof as ordinarily prudent men and women would act upon in their most important affairs. A reasonable doubt is a doubt based upon reason and common sense. It does not mean a fanciful or capricious doubt, nor does it mean beyond all possibility of doubt. If you serve on this jury, you and your fellow jurors will be the sole judges of whether a witness is to be believed and of the weight to be given a witness's testimony. There are no hard and fast rules to guide you in this respect. But in determining believability and weight of testimony, jurors may take into consideration the witness's interest, or lack of interest in the outcome of the case, their relationship to the parties, the ability and opportunity to know, remember, and relate the facts, their manner, their age and experience, their frankness and sincerity, or the lack thereof, the reasonableness or the unreasonableness of their testimony in light of all the other evidence in the case, and any other factors that bear on believability and weight. If on this jury, you should rely in the last analysis upon your own experience, good judgment, and common sense. Now, there are certain things you should not do during jury selection. You are not investigators. You're not to go out to do any looking, and you are not to ask people about this matter. You are not to use the internet to look for information about this case or about the law. Above all, you must not talk to anyone who is involved, the lawyers or the witnesses or the spectators. Do not be offended if the attorneys, parties, or witnesses do not speak to you. They know it would be improper to contact you except through the normal selection process and will confine themselves to a brief greeting. During the selection process, your family and friends will be curious as to what you are doing. You may tell them you are on a panel of potential jurors in a criminal case, and that is all you should tell them. And since that is all you should tell family and friends, that is all you should tell the general public. So, during these proceedings, please refrain from using Facebook, Twitter, or other social media to announce that you are a potential juror or to comment on this trial. You may access those social media tools, except for the news feeds that you might have, but please do not publish any information about this case or your thoughts about this case. You do not have to stay away from people and refuse to speak to them. Do whatever you wish, but do not talk about the case, and do not talk at all to anyone involved in it. Because of the nature of the charges, this case is receiving media coverage. Do not read about this case in the newspapers or online, and do not listen to news about it on radio or television. This trial, including jury selection, is being televised, but no video of you or any other juror will be taken at any time, now or during trial if you are selected. Also, your name will not be used in the courtroom. You will only be referred to by your random number to respect your privacy. The audio of anything you say will be broadcast, unless we need to discuss something deeply personal or extremely sensitive or embarrassing, or which would tend to specifically identify you. In that case, I will specifically order the audio to not be broadcast. In that case, you will still have to answer questions on the record, but without audio or video broadcast. Now, with the exception of juror number 109, I'm going to have you wait in the other courtroom. Please maintain all our COVID protocols, masks, distancing, and such. Feel free to use all the hand sanitizer you would like, and we'll be back to you in a minute. All right, and you are juror number 109? Yeah. Going to have you come on up here. Good afternoon, sir. Right here. Good afternoon. You are juror number 109, correct?
Correct.
All right. First thing we're going to do is swear you in so that we know that all your answers are under oath. So raise your right hand. Do you swear or affirm under penalty of perjury that you'll truthfully answer all questions about your qualifications to serve as a juror?
I do.
All right. Thank you. A couple things. We have plexiglass between us, plexiglass in front of you, and also the lawyers will have plexiglass at the lectern in front of them. You anticipate exactly what I'm going to say. You may, because of all that, feel free to remove your mask if you'd like.
Thank you.
If at any time you wish to put it back on, feel free. We don't take an insult at that. I'm going to keep my mask on just so that we have that protection. So, a couple things before I turn it over to the attorneys. You filled out a questionnaire. Again, thank you for doing that. Provides us with a lot of good information to start. Was everything true on the questionnaire?
Yes, with the exception of I did go to another protest.
Okay.
So I had indicated on my questionnaire that I went to just to see what was going on. There was a protest probably about 6 blocks from where I live, and I heard the commotion. That was the day of the fires, and so that was the first time, and it was more of a curiosity, and I was a little concerned about my neighborhood because I lived so close to what was going on. And the second time, a friend had asked me if I wanted to go to a protest with her down at WCCO protesting Liz Collins, which I did.
Okay. Did you just go, or did you carry a sign, or
I just went. I didn't carry any signs.
did you participate in any way? Did you just march, or were you just
I
kind of there to
just, yeah,
watch?
I marched along with the people.
Okay. All right. Thank you for that additional information.
Yep.
And in fact, since it's been a few months, there might be things in the questionnaire that are no longer accurate.
Sure.
Or maybe in reflection you thought, oh, I should have added this or changed
Yeah.
this. Your opinions have may have evolved. So however you want to approach it, feel comfortable in adding to and giving a completely different answer than what's in the questionnaire. As long as it's open and honest, that's what we want. Okay?
Sure.
The lawyers are going to ask you questions or focus you on specific questions. And they may read the question and your answer. It's not to be confrontational. They're doing it to refresh your memory about what you said. And the questionnaire also advised you not to read any articles or to watch any media coverage about the case. But we understand there's a lot of coverage out there. And since the questionnaire was filled out and today, were you inadvertently exposed to any information about the case or any related cases, anything like that?
Yes, I do get notifications on my phone, and I did get a notification about the civil case and
Okay.
the award.
And what do you recall from it?
That the family got $27 million.
Okay, and you called it an award. What was your understanding of what?
Well, in the civil case, of course, they're going, after the city for funds because of the death of their family member.
So you say a word like a jury verdict, or is that how you understood it, or?
No, I just I understood it as the city of Minneapolis decided
To settle?
offer that to the family.
Okay.
To settle it, yes.
Now, when you filled out the questionnaire, I want to make sure I'm right here. One of the questions that we had was whether or not, basically it's a much longer version, but can you be fair and impartial? And you answered yes. When you heard about that settlement, which of course is a different case, did that move you in either direction, like where you couldn't say you're impartial anymore?
It did. I would say I would still be impartial, but I thought it was a dumb move by the city
Okay.
to do that during jury selection. So
You think mostly the timing of it?
yes,
Okay. Because of the danger that it might move people who can't.
yeah,
put
I feel that it could sway people,
Okay.
even if they say it won't. I think it could.
Okay. You yourself do not feel swayed by it, is that
No.
right? Okay. You understand that's a separate case, separate
Yes.
legal issues,
Yes.
separate decisions.
Yes,
Okay. All right. So you think you can still be fair and impartial?
correct.
Okay. Excellent. Anything else that you've seen inadvertently? And we understand it's all inadvertently because you almost can't avoid it. We know.
Yeah, I mean, nothing that I don't think I knew, from the incident.
Okay.
Yeah.
And you listed for us what you kind of knew from the media beforehand.
Yes.
The bottom line on all these questions is, not only can you be fair and impartial, but in order to be fair, you have to put aside anything you've seen outside the courtroom, set aside any opinions you may have formed. And it's all right to have opinions about the case, especially when you see things about it. However, when you're a juror, you have to decide this case just on the evidence and the law that I give you. Do you think you could do that, kind of put aside what you've heard otherwise?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
All right, great.
I did serve on a jury once before.
Okay, tell me about that experience. Was it a good one or a bad one?
It was a good experience.
Do
It was
you remember?
definitely a good experience.
Okay, and without telling me the result, was it a civil or criminal case?
Criminal.
All right, was that here in Hennepin County?
No, it was in Broward County, Florida.
Oh, okay. So some of the concepts are the same, but a lot are
Yeah.
going to be different.
Yes.
Okay. Anything about that experience that made you want to go running off and screaming in the hills to get away from us, or
No.
was it favorable?
It was a good experience.
Okay. Willing to do it again?
I would be.
Okay. Let's see. Do you recognize any of the witnesses who are on the witness list?
No.
Okay. We did estimate that this trial would be 4 weeks long, starting March 29th. Can you make that work for your personal and professional life?
Yeah, I'm currently unemployed, so
Okay.
it works for me.
Not that $20 a day is a whole lot for anybody, but you don't have a job that would keep you distracted or anything like that, or anything that you are going to start soon?
No.
Okay. Excellent. Before I turn over the attorneys, do you have any questions for me?
No, I don't.
All right. Mr. Nelson, as to juror number 109, you may inquire.
Good afternoon, sir.
Good afternoon.
Thank you for being here. Thank you for your patience today. Just have a couple follow-up questions before I get into my normal routine here, if that's all right.
Sure.
You said that a friend of yours invited you to a protest at WCCO regarding Liz Collins. Is that because she was or is married to Bob Kroll?
That's correct.
Okay. And were you there opposed to her participation or in support of Mr. Kroll, or
I really
indifferent?
didn't feel like I had an opinion. My friend, of course, was very opposed to Bob Crow.
Okay.
But I went there because she asked me, and
She just wanted someone to go
yeah,
with her?
she wanted someone to go with her.
Okay. But you don't have you didn't take a personal opinion in it, or?
No, I mean, I heard the outrage in the city that they wanted Bob Kroll to resign, which I thought maybe it's a good thing he might resign because of all the chaos that had been happening in the city.
Okay.
But that's really the only opinion I had, other than I don't know the guy. I've never done any research on him, so other than what people were saying.
Okay, fair enough. So I just want to ask you a couple of general questions first, and then I'm going to follow up with some of your responses on your questionnaire, if that's okay. So if you and I were to meet in different circumstances at a social event or party or whatever, and we had our first conversation, what are a couple of things I'd learn about you during that conversation?
That I'm a friendly, honest person.
Okay. You'd obviously, I mean, you said you live very close to the 3rd Precinct, I think.
Correct.
And you obviously had heard about this case before coming into the courtroom today,
Yes, I have.
and before filling out the jury questionnaire as well.
Yes.
Now, in terms of that, how did you feel when you learned that you may be a juror in this case?
A little frightened at first, thinking, okay, I have no idea if I got selected, and you know, if chaos in the city happened again, would I be safe?
Gotcha. So you had some concerns, fair to say,
Yes.
about your personal safety?
Correct.
And now let me ask you, when you came down to the government center today and you saw what the current condition of it is, the fortifications and the military, how did that alleviate any of your concerns?
Yeah, I was quite impressed.
Okay. Made you feel safer, at least while you're here, right?
Yes.
Okay. And once you came into the courtroom just a little bit ago and you heard that we're doing whatever we can to protect your anonymity, did that alleviate some concerns?
Yes, it did.
All right. Now, at some point in the future, however, when the court deems it safe to do so, your name, if you serve on this jury, may be released to the public. Do you understand that?
Correct.
We don't know when that's going to happen, if it's short-term, long-term, but the court will determine when it's safe to do so. And are you okay with that?
Yes, I am.
All right. In your personal or professional life, can you think of a time when you were called upon to resolve a conflict between two parties?
Well, in my professional life, yes. I mean, there was many instances where I had to do that. I worked for a large communications company, and we did have a lot of I worked in business solutions, so we did have a lot of conflicts with decision making. So
Okay. And you said you'd also previously served on a jury before, too.
yes, I have.
Again, we don't want to know the result of or
Yes.
the verdict, but can I ask you, did you actually deliberate all the way through to a verdict?
I was an alternate.
You were an alternate?
Yes.
Okay. So, I mean, you understand a little bit about the process based on your past experience, but also in your professional life. When two people are involved in a conflict, how do you approach that situation?
My approach would be to calm down the situation first.
Okay. And let's assume you're successful in calming it down. How do you go about trying to bring two sides together?
I would have a discussion with both sides just to make sure that everyone is understood and that their opinion is heard. And
Okay. So in this situation, if you were to deliberate in this particular case, you understand that conflict may emerge amongst jurors.
yes,
And that conflict may be bigger in scale, it may be smaller in scale, may be over evidence, but that's the whole point of this process. Do you understand?
I understand that.
So if you were in the deliberation room and one side of the jury is saying, this, I think that these pieces of evidence or information are very important, and another side was saying, no, that's not so important. How do you approach it to try to get the two sides to come together?
Well, I would ask both sides to explain.
Okay.
And I think maybe the most reasonable explanation, should win over.
Okay. Do you think it's different if you are directly involved in the conflict? Like if you're already on one side and you're trying to convince the other to come over to your side?
Do I think there's a difference in what?
In how you would approach that situation?
No, I think it would have to be the same.
Would you be willing to listen to the other side and potentially be convinced?
Yes.
Okay. And are you the type of person who would simply agree just to kind of get it over with and make a decision, or would you kind of dig your feet in and say, no, we need to look at this?
No, I would definitely want to resolve it. I don't think I'd be swayed by just getting it over.
Okay, fair enough. Can you think of a situation in your personal or professional life where you've had to try to figure out if somebody is lying?
Well, of course, I did. I was on another jury, so I did have to listen to witnesses.
Okay.
Yeah, I think you have to make that decision based on maybe facts and based on expression.
Okay. Do you think it's possible for two people to look at the same situation and they're standing right next to each other and they watch something happen and see it or perceive it differently?
Oh yeah, definitely.
And what factors do you think would cause two people to see something so differently?
Maybe different political views.
Okay. So political views may come into play. What about their personal life experiences? Do you think that could affect how they
Oh yeah, maybe if someone was more religious, and maybe another person was, agnostic. I think that might.
Okay. So there are social factors, religious factors, political factors that may affect something. Is that a fair assessment?
Yes.
Do you think that two people who have different training or education may look at something different?
Possibly, yeah.
Right.
You know.
So I think I used this analogy yesterday as you've got a bridge that falls down and one person is an architect and one person is a home builder and one person is a truck driver. Do you think that their education and experience may affect what they view when that bridge collapses?
Oh yeah, definitely
Or
there.
that wall, I should say?
Yes.
Do you think that despite someone's experience or education, I should say despite their education or training, that a person may have other experiences that would otherwise qualify them to make an observation about a situation?
Yeah, I do.
So if that truck driver happened to be a bridge builder and before he became a truck driver, he may have a different experience. that could affect how he perceives that?
Definitely, yes.
Okay. Can you think of a situation in your personal life where you've been 100% convinced that you are right, only to later learn that you were wrong?
I mean, there's been many instances. I can't come up with one, but yes, that has been proven probably many times in my life. So.
Okay. And I guess I'm not looking for a specific example, but just more like, how do you react when something like that happens?
You just, I don't know. I would say it's a learning experience.
Sure.
Chalk it up as a learning experience.
Okay. Can you take that and apply it to future situations? And
Oh, most definitely.
okay. Now, ultimately, if you were selected to be on this jury, you understand that you would have to judge this case based on the evidence presented in court.
Yes.
And any information you may have had from outside or before you came into court, you have to basically put that aside. Can you do that?
Yes, I can.
Okay. And at the end of the case, the judge will give you the law that applies in the case, and you have to make a decision as to what the verdict would be. You understand that?
Yes.
Now, you may read the law and you may go, that seems wrong to me, or I disagree with that, or I think the law, we should work to change the law. But if you were a juror on this case, could you follow the law even if you disagreed with it or thought it needed to be changed?
Yes, because it's the law.
So I'm going to just follow up on a few of your
Sure.
questions. And again, we are not trying to trick you or anything. We'll read you specific responses
Okay.
and specific questions, okay? You were asked about some questions about a video that was being circulated of the arrest of Mr. Floyd. I want to make sure that we're on the same page about what that video was that you saw, because several have been released. There was one video that was like a bystander took a video of the police. They uploaded it up to social media and it went viral and became news. That was the principal video. Then there were some body cameras from police officers that were released. And then there were some security or surveillance videos from neighboring businesses. Which of those videos do you think you saw?
I think I definitely saw the first video, and then the second video with the body cam, I saw that as well.
Okay. Now, did you go on the internet and like look at the actual like the full length videos of all of those, or did you?
I just watched the news, whatever the news provided at that time.
Okay. So maybe some shorter clips, 30 seconds here.
Yeah, I don't think I watched any full length video.
Okay, fair enough. So you were asked to kind of describe what you saw, and you wrote, "What I remember hearing on the news is the protests arose due to the death of George Floyd, due to an arrest and restraint police did during the arrest." That's kind of what you remembered hearing? And you were asked a series of questions about your general impression of both Mr. Chauvin and Mr. Floyd. And with respect to both, you checked the box neutral and had some thoughts. So with respect to Mr. Chauvin, you wrote, and again, this questionnaire was directed at other officers involved as well, but you wrote, they were responding to a crime and were following training received. Do you have personal experience in the training that the Minneapolis Police Department provides its officers?
No.
Okay. Do you have any knowledge or personal knowledge about whether the training that the arrest of Mr. Floyd was consistent with the police department's policies?
I don't know.
Okay.
Yeah.
So ultimately, what may become an issue in this case is the use of force and the training policies of the Minneapolis Police Department. And are you open to the proposition that these officers were following training or potentially not following their training?
Yeah, I would be open. Yeah, like I said, I don't know what specific training they received, but, you know,
Okay.
if that's information that's provided, yes.
Okay, good. With respect to Mr. Floyd, you had again, a neutral impression of Mr. Floyd, and you wrote, he committed a crime but shouldn't have died during the arrest process. So let me ask you a question. Have you formed an opinion that Mr. Floyd died as a result of or at the hands of Minneapolis Police Department?
I would say he died while in custody, yes.
Okay. Have you formed an opinion as to the cause of death or who is responsible for his death?
Well, I think there might be several different causes.
Okay.
So,
You don't know, for example.
yeah, I don't know all the facts.
All right. Again, can you keep an open mind? Can you listen to all of the evidence, judge it fairly and impartially? And because the cause of death may be an issue in this case as well. You understand that?
Yes.
And again, if you listen to the evidence, can you analyze that question based exclusively on the evidence presented in court?
I think I can, yes.
When you were asked a question about whether you've ever talked about Mr. Floyd's death with family, friends, coworkers, or posted anything on social media, and you checked the box yes, let me ask you, did you post any opinions on social media?
I didn't post my opinion, but I read several folks' opinions,
Okay.
yes.
Were those opinions negatively directed at the officers, positively directed at the officers, or a combination of both?
I think there was both. I mean, I do have some family members that post, and particularly a cousin of mine, her dad was a sheriff's deputy, so.
Okay. And we'll talk about that. I think you
Okay.
reference that later in a sec. So, you had some, but the opinions that you shared were, what you wrote is mostly that the destruction of Minneapolis was a scary ordeal.
Yes, I believe it. You know, I'm still frightened about what might happen.
Okay. And I think that's reasonable. I think there was a lot of uncertainty and apprehension in the city at that time, right?
Yeah.
And especially given your proximity to the third precinct, right?
Correct.
And you indicated that, again, in your questionnaire and then this afternoon as well, that when some of the violence started breaking out in the city, you went and to kind of see it with your own eyes?
Yes, I did.
All right.
I did.
And
Saw
was
the
that
destruction.
for the purpose of engaging in protest or looting, or was it for the purpose of...
I was pretty appalled by the whole situation. I didn't think it needed to go that far.
Okay. In terms of, there is a question that asks, do you believe your community has been negatively or positively affected by any of the protests that have taken place in the Twin Cities since Mr. Floyd's death? And you wrote negatively, the crime rate in the city is out of control.
And it still is.
Right. So let me ask you about that is, do you differentiate between protests and rioting?
Yes.
Okay. What is the difference in your mind between protests and rioting?
Protests are peaceful, people wanting their opinion to be heard, versus rioting is when you're being destructive or even doing criminal activity.
Okay. And do you think that there were any positive results of the protests versus the rioting?
I definitely think there was positives in the sense, you know, the city is trying to figure out, okay, what can we do better?
Okay, good. You were asked a question have you or someone close to you ever helped support or advocated in favor of or against police reform? And if yes, please explain you wrote, after the riots, friends and myself discussed what could be done so this doesn't happen again. And were you referring to like the rioting happening again, or in terms of the death of an individual in custody, or both?
I would say both, yes.
All right. There was a page on in the questionnaire where you were asked to read some statements and rank your sort of agreement or disagreement with those statements on a scale. I'm assuming you don't remember every little statement, and I'll read a couple to you. You were asked the question, police in my community make me feel safe, and you somewhat agreed with that. Why do you feel less safe or somewhat disagree with the notion that police keep you safe?
Because I haven't really seen any on our streets lately, so I feel that it makes our city unsafe. If you don't see police, your criminals are going to do crime.
Right. Do you think it was different before the rioting and things happened in the city?
Yeah, I think their presence was very visible.
Okay. You strongly disagreed with the notion of defunding the Minneapolis Police Department.
Yeah, I think it's an idiotic idea.
Okay. Now, in terms of you've got a relative who is an attorney. Does that person still practice law?
No, she's retired. She lives in California.
Okay. Did she practice in criminal law or prosecution, criminal defense?
She was a judge too in the state of Wisconsin, so I'm sure she did some criminal.
Okay. You also have some relatives who served as police officers as well.
Correct.
Did any of your relatives serve with the Minneapolis Police Department?
No.
All right. I think you said someone was in a sheriff's department or something. You don't need to say which sheriff's department, but is it a larger jurisdiction or a smaller?
Yes, it's a larger.
Okay. Do you have frequent contact with your relatives who are police officers?
My uncle that was in the sheriff's department, he passed away.
Okay.
I have a cousin who got injured on the job, and I don't talk to him frequently, maybe a couple times a year.
Okay. So I guess the question is if you were a juror on this case, would you call up your relative and say, hey, they're telling me this is how police are trained, they're telling me, this information, is this right?
No, I wouldn't do that.
All right. Likewise, you have a relative who is a nurse. Would you contact your relative who's a nurse to ask her or him her opinion about medical information?
No.
In fact, you were asked, would any of the experiences you noted above make it difficult for you to be fair and impartial? And you wrote, no, I would make a decision based on the facts.
Correct.
And so you feel that you could be a fair and impartial juror?
I do.
Okay. And you were asked, again, in a different context, a similar question about your experiences making it difficult for you to be fair and impartial. And you wrote, I feel I understand that I need to keep an open mind in hearing both sides of a criminal case. Do you agree with that proposition still?
I do.
And ultimately, when you were asked if you wanted to serve on a juror in this case, and you checked the box yes, and you wrote that you feel you could be neutral and unbiased throughout.
I do.
So, sir, I guess I have to ask you, can you apply the presumption of innocence?
Yes.
Will you?
I would.
Will you listen to the entirety of the evidence in this trial and base your decision exclusively on what you hear in court, as opposed to anything you may have learned or any opinions that you have about any of these matters?
Yes.
If I may have a moment, Your Honor. Your Honor, just one brief question before.
Sure.
If police officers testify in this case, I know you have some family members who are police officers, but if a police officer testifies, would you give their testimony more credibility or believe them more simply by virtue of the fact that they're police officers?
I'd have to hear the testimony. I couldn't say yes one way or the other.
All right. So you would agree that that sometimes police officers, well, let's put it this way: if a police officer and just a citizen observe an event, the same event, there are those two people standing next to each other, exclusively because the person one of them is a police officer, would you give that person's testimony more credibility?
No.
If I may have a moment. Mayor will pass for cause.
Mr. Slusher.
Thank you, Your Honor. Juror number 109, good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
I'd like to follow up on that last line of questioning
Sure.
regarding the credibility of law enforcement officers. And I know you indicated that your uncle, who's now passed away, served as a law enforcement officer. Is that right?
Yes.
Were you pretty close to your uncle?
Yes.
Did you discuss his job with him on occasion?
Not his day-to-day activities of his job, but he did tell me stories from time to time.
Usually when a cop tells stories, it's not about a boring day at work.
No, it's more about how he let some cute girls go without a ticket for speeding.
He'd tell you stories of letting people go without writing.
Just giving them a warning.
Okay. Do you ever tell you anything more exciting than letting people off of speeding tickets?
Not really. No.
Didn't share with you any high-speed chases or action stories, anything like that?
Well, he actually worked he was a jailer, so he worked in the jail. He didn't really tell me a lot of stories about people that might have been arrested.
How long did he work as a jailer?
I want to say at least 15 years.
Okay. So was he a sheriff's deputy?
Yes.
Okay. Did he exclusively work in the jail?
I think before that he worked on he had a beat that he did.
Okay. I guess similarly, did he ever tell you any stories about inmates or people being unruly? Anything exciting happen at work?
No, he had mentioned that he had taken in a couple of his brothers when they were younger, and
He had to arrest his
had
brothers?
to try to get them out of jail. Yeah.
Okay. And you had a cousin. Was that your uncle's son then?
No, this is a different cousin.
Okay. Who was also a law enforcement officer who
Yeah.
was injured on the job?
Yeah, he was injured, I think, trying to take someone into custody. He got injured. They got in a fight.
Without giving any detail as
Yeah.
to the department or whatnot, can you tell me what you recall about your cousin getting injured, taking someone into custody?
I don't know all the specifics of what had happened, but he had like a mini stroke, so he
Your
ended
cousin
up
did?
Yeah, he ended up having to go to the hospital, and then he went on disability.
I'm sorry to hear that. As a
Yeah.
direct result of taking into someone.
Well, that's what he
custody.
told me. I don't know all the details on that.
Sure.
But yes.
But he had a stroke, and then after that, he was unable to work as a law enforcement
Yes.
officer.
Yep.
Did he have to go on disability? Was
Yeah,
he
he's on
unable to work?
disability now, I believe. Yep.
So he was permanently injured as a result of this?
Yes.
Okay. Now, obviously you've seen the video,
Yes.
right? And I think your questionnaire indicated that you've watched it maybe 4 or 5 times. Correct?
Yeah, probably.
And so
I've seen
you
it.
understand that this case is about a situation in which there's a struggle over bringing someone into custody.
Yes.
Okay. And, and really, the process only works if everybody's completely open and honest about how they feel about things. And I just need to know, as you sit here, knowing that, this case is really about a situation that seems, at least somewhat similar to what your cousin experienced, your cousin being a law enforcement officer and becoming permanently disabled after a struggle. I'm just wondering if you could share your thoughts on how that makes you feel, knowing that these cases are somewhat similar.
Well, I didn't even think about that, but yeah, they are. I'm not sure what the struggle was about and what the crime that my cousin was trying to take this individual into custody for, but there is similarity, I guess. So.
And just knowing that and understanding that as a juror, if you were called to be a juror in this case, you really need to be a neutral, a completely neutral finder of fact. And as someone who was close with someone who was injured in a struggle over an arrest, I'm wondering if you truly believe that you could be absolutely neutral in a case like this.
I believe I can.
And again, we have to take you at your word because you're under oath and we believe that you're being honest. But sometimes people don't understand how deeply things like this can affect them. It sounds like you've given it some thought, not too much before I brought it up, but I mean, as you think about it, do you have any hesitation that you could be neutral in a case like this?
No, I know I definitely could be neutral. So.
And then, I also have to ask in response to the question about officer credibility, it sounds like you have a very strong respect for law enforcement.
Yeah, I do, but it doesn't depend on what they do for a living. I'm going to hear witnesses, and I have to believe that everyone's going to be honest. So it's not like I would take an officer's word over a different witness's word.
Or what you would perceive to be sort of the officer's side of this case versus the non-officer's side of this case,
Yes.
one party over another.
No, I definitely wouldn't. I wouldn't feel one or the other would, be more worthy.
And again, I appreciate your candid answers, and you need to think about it very carefully because, again, this can only work if people are being 100% truthful with themselves. And in the response to the questionnaire about knowledge of the case, you gave some facts and you talked about seeing the video 4 to 5 times. In response to some questioning by counsel, you indicated that you thought there could be other causes of death. You recall that?
I'm sorry. Can you repeat the question?
Yeah. Did you do you recall when responding to defense counsel's questions about causes of death? You think you said something to the effect of there could be a lot of causes of death.
Well, yeah. There could be possibility that he had some kind of physical condition that could have maybe factored in to his death. Yes, I mean,
I'm wondering if that's something that you'd heard before, in the media.
well, I mean, during the news that was coming out, there had been word that he had taken drugs, so that's could also be a factor.
And on that, that he had taken drugs, because I don't think that you'd mentioned that in the questionnaire.
Yeah.
Had you heard that that George Floyd had taken drugs?
No, that was what was being reported on the news. So that's, so I guess yeah, I did hear. I didn't know if that was true, if it wasn't true.
And how do you think that would affect you as a fact finder if somebody was taking drugs?
I still don't think it would attribute. I mean, it could have attributed to what had happened to George Floyd, but I believe that there's possibly more than just one factor.
Okay. And then under general impressions of the defendants, you said it was neutral, and you indicated they were responding to a crime and were following training received. What training is it?
I think I was referring to the rookies.
Okay.
Because they were new on the job. From what the news was reporting, they were new on the job and only following instructions.
Okay. And do you recall where you heard that or how you heard that?
TV news.
Okay. If we may have a sidebar, Your Honor.
Yeah. Juror 109, we are going to excuse you from this panel. So the deputy will take some paperwork from you, but you're free to go. Thank you for all your time on this case. Now let's hold off. All right, you can make a record of the off the record conversation.
Thank you, Your Honor. Your Honor, the state moved to dismiss juror number 109 for cause on the basis of bias. I believe that based on his responses to the questions and a lot of the material that he left out of the questionnaire, I believe that he was being evasive, and given his strong affinity to law enforcement, I believe he was doing so with a purpose. And so we made the motion, court denied it, and we exercised our preempt.
And Mr. Nelson, anything to add?
Your Honor, I would just note for the record that prior, the court has advised every potential juror that they are free to modify or change things that are included in their questionnaires, to add it to it. That's what this particular juror did. He didn't deny or lie about what he had heard. I did not sense he was being evasive, nor did I. He clearly stated that he could view law enforcement in the same light as any other witness and did not exhibit a bias under Logan towards law enforcement.
All right, I denied the challenge for cause. I did not feel he was evasive. In fact, he is the only juror so far who, when I asked, is there anything to add to your questionnaire, actually had something to add. And he added that he had attended a protest against Bob Kroll at WCCO TV. And that was, so I think the fact that he was willing to provide new information was not being evasive. And I sense that he was being honest and more details coming out than probably what he put in. So based on the totality, I think he could have been fair and impartial and allow the state to exercise peremptory, which it did. So that is state peremptory. All right, let's do our next juror. come on up here. Good afternoon.
Hello.
You are Juror 110, is that correct?
Yes.
All right. A couple things before I turn the questioning over to the attorneys. First, I'm going to swear you in so that all your answers are under oath. You could raise your right hand. Do you swear or affirm under penalty of perjury that you will truthfully answer all questions about your qualifications to serve as a juror?
I do.
All right. A couple things. We have plexiglass between us, plexiglass in front of you, plexiglass in front of the attorneys where they question you from, plus they're a pretty good distance away. I'm going to keep my mask on. My bottom line being, you can adjust your mask any way you want. You can take it off, leave it on. Totally up to you, whatever makes you feel comfortable in the witness stand. Okay? And mask on or off, I'm going to need you to pull a little bit forward towards the microphone. The microphone itself does not move very well,
Okay.
unfortunately.
Is that better?
That works.
Okay.
Excellent. All right. Well, first of all, you filled out a questionnaire, and thank you for doing that. That was very helpful. Is everything true that's on the questionnaire?
Yes.
All right. Anything you wanted to change or add to the questionnaire?
I don't think so.
All right. And that's kind of a broad question because it was a long time ago and a lot of questions. But you should feel comfortable adding to, changing, because sometimes in the 3 months or 2 months that you filled this out, your opinions might evolve, or you might remember some details you didn't remember before, or maybe something you realized on a question was inaccurate, so you have to correct it.
Okay.
I want you to know that you should feel comfortable doing that, adding or saying something different from what's in the questionnaire. Don't worry about it. Is that the same thing? Just give us your open, honest answers, and that'll be greatly appreciated, okay? In fact, they'll probably more likely come up as opposed to me just asking you anything to add. The attorneys will walk through some of the questions and answers, and they will read the question and probably your answer as well.
Okay.
Not to be confrontational, but just to refresh your memory as to what you said. Okay? All right. Now, you're not supposed to read any media or watch any TV, anything like that, because you're a potential juror. But we recognize that it's been a couple months, a lot of media reports on this case, and some jurors have been inadvertently exposed to information about this case, about related cases, about pretrial matters. Have you been exposed to anything like that?
Yes. I haven't tried to be, but just sometimes scrolling through social media, you come across something and I just try to keep scrolling by it.
Okay. And do you recall anything specific that kind of jumped at you about this case?
Nothing specifically, I guess. I mean, I was trying to avoid it, so I didn't necessarily read into it. There
Okay.
was different images and people's opinions, but I didn't read into it, I guess.
Okay. Did you, and this usually happens, you see a headline or something. Any headlines or anything you saw about this case or about related cases?
On the radio, I heard that there were, I think, 7 jurors already selected.
Okay.
That was a couple days ago. So
All right.
I heard that and then changed stations. So
All right. As I said, we understand this is all inadvertent, but almost impossible to escape.
yeah.
So we just want to know kind of what you've been exposed to. The bottom line is that anything that you read or hear or see outside the courtroom and any opinions you might have formed based on that, you have to put aside. Because to be a juror on this case, you have to be fair and impartial. Part of being fair is that you only, everybody knows that what you're deciding on is what's in the courtroom. Because we don't know necessarily everything you've been exposed to on the outside. Can you do that, you think?
I think so.
Okay. And I think we'll talk a little bit, or the attorneys might talk about, because he said maybe in the presumption of innocence in this case you might have difficulty.
Yeah.
Do you want to just comment on that right now? Give me your thoughts on that.
Okay. My thoughts, I guess.
And let me stop you. If there's anything private or that you want to go off the audio to explain your answer, just tell me that.
Okay.
But if you can without, go ahead.
Yeah. I just know this is like a big case, so it makes me nervous to be
Okay.
potentially involved. Yeah, and I guess everyone has not everyone. Some people that choose to typically share their opinion have very strong opinions.
Right.
So it seems like what you read or what you glance by is either way one side or way the other. So it makes it difficult to disregard that information, I guess, when people feel so strongly one way or the other.
Well, the good news is not only can you disregard it, but I'm ordering you to disregard
Yes.
it. But if you've been exposed to so much that you don't feel you could put it aside, because it's not a question usually of intelligence or personality, it's more for some people it's the amount of information they've had that they can't really put it aside. Do you think you fall into that category, or do you think you can put it all aside and just decide on what you hear in the courtroom?
I don't know, it's kind of borderline, I guess.
Okay.
There is a lot of information out there, and I try to remember that it may not be true or I'm not hearing the full story, but there is a lot of people have their opinions.
Okay. I'm actually going to, because you have one question marked private, and I think I know what you're talking about, at least from other answers. That and the question about whether or not you want to serve, I think might implicate this as well. So I'm going to find under the rules that this might be particularly sensitive. And so what we're going to do is we're going to go off audio, which means the only audio that is being broadcast is here in the courtroom. All right. Juror 110, we are back on audio, and I'm going to excuse you from this jury. We've made a record of the discussion, but I think given your situation, and it would be hard to be fair and impartial, so I'm going to release you. In fact, you're released from all jury service, so you don't have to worry about it until you get a summons maybe years from now.
Okay.
And I wish you good luck.
Thank you.
Okay. Sir, come on up. How are you? Not bad.
That's good.
All right, you are juror number 111, correct?
Yes, sir.
Before I turn you over to the attorneys, I'm going to swear you in so that all your answers are under oath. If you could raise your right hand. Do you swear or affirm, under penalty of perjury, that you will truthfully answer all questions about your qualifications to serve as a juror?
I swear.
Okay. A couple things before I turn it over to the attorneys. Number one, we have plexiglass between us, plexiglass in front of you. The attorneys have plexiglass from where they're going to be talking to you, and that's quite a distance away. What that means is you can take off your mask if you want. You can leave it on if you want. I kind of leave it all to you. It would be more comfortable or more easy to talk. Feel free to remove it and even put it back on if necessary, but leave it up to you. Okay?
Okay.
And mask on or off. If you could pull a little closer to the microphone, because we can't move it very well.
Sure.
So that's great. Well, first of all, you filled out a questionnaire, and thank you for doing so.
Mm-hmm.
Gives us a lot of good information to start with. Was everything on that questionnaire true?
I believe so, yes.
Okay. Is there anything in the months that have gone by that you thought, well, there's something I should change or add to, maybe an opinion that's changed, anything like that?
No.
Okay. Now, the attorneys will probably go through some of the specific questions.
Okay.
And they will read the question to you and also your answer, not to be confrontational, but just to refresh your memory.
Mm-hmm.
If your answer has changed or you need to add to it, feel free to do so. I want you to feel comfortable saying things that are different from the questionnaire.
Okay.
One thing the questionnaire told you to do is to avoid newspaper or other news articles, other media, talking about this case or related cases. But we understand, given the amount of media coverage the case has had and related cases, that you might have been exposed to some information. Is there anything from since you filled out the questionnaire till today that you were made aware of?
I work at a bar up in St. Joseph, and
Okay.
so some of the patrons like to talk just about, in general,
Okay.
things. I don't think it's something specific, but people have been saying, oh, they've got however many people selected already.
Okay.
And having to take time off, I was like, I'm being selected for a jury. That's just it. I need to make time for that. And people are pretty wise to what's going on. And I try and leave it alone and not agree or disagree, but they'd like to tell me things because they feel like I'm somehow connected. So I don't know if that made sense.
Oh,
No, nothing specifically that I can think of.
Having been assigned to this case since June, I know exactly what you mean.
Right.
Is this like a sports bar where you got TVs all around? And
Yeah, but it's mainly sports.
okay, so not a lot of news programs where all of a sudden you see this headline.
We'll get the like, oh, breaking things are shutting down, but not like we don't have Fox or CBN or NBC.
Okay.
Nope.
Have you heard anything about any related cases?
No.
Okay. The important issue here is a juror has to decide this case just on what they hear in the courtroom, based on the law that I give you. You have to put aside everything you've heard or might even hear in the future, because we understand people get inadvertently exposed. It happens. But you have to put it aside and also put aside any opinions you may have formed. It's okay to have those opinions in reaction to what you've learned, but you have to put those aside and decide this case just on the evidence you hear in court.
Yeah.
Do you think you could do that?
I believe so.
Okay. Did you recognize any witnesses that were on the list?
I did not.
Okay. Now, this trial is going to be about 4 weeks long, starting on March 29th. Can you make that work personally and professionally?
I can.
Okay.
I'd rather not because so I'm in college currently, and I'm entering into my thesis class, which is starting on Monday.
Okay.
So that's it'll end probably the beginning of April.
Okay.
Or you said May or March?
March.
Oh yeah. So
I can.
and I can always push that off, but I don't think I'd be back in that same class. I'd have to take an entirely different class, and I've tried to work hard to get into this specific class.
Okay.
But I mean, if need be, it's my civic duty to make that time, so I could make that time.
Okay. Is this like once a year offer or something that?
Yeah. So we call it the capstone, but it changes. So this year they're doing a theory of rhetoric capstone, which is what my interest is. Next year they'll have a different rhetoric class. It won't be theory; it'll be rhetoric in ancient Greece or in ancient Italy or India. Who knows? But they change it up. So, and I don't know what those are going to look like because they don't release the class list very far in advance. So.
Okay. All right. I'm going to let the lawyers follow up on that.
Sure.
But one thing we want you to do is, if it truly will be a hardship for you, we want to know that.
Okay.
We know everybody wants to do their civic duty. And if you can, great. That's wonderful. But you need to also be honest if it's going to be a hardship for you to skip that class. I'm going to let the lawyers follow up on that later.
Mm-hmm.
So let's see. That's about it. Unless you have any questions for me, I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Nelson for questioning.
No questions.
All right. Mr. Nelson, the main part is juror number 111.
Good afternoon, sir.
Howdy.
Thank you for your patience and for being here today. Just I'm going to follow up before we get too far in about this class and the situation. So you said it was a thesis class?
Yes.
Is it for your senior thesis?
Yes.
If you didn't take this class, would it cause you to have to extend your educational career so you could get into a thesis class?
Yes. I'm going to be taking the first semester of next year already because I took the first semester of this year off.
Okay.
So I'll still be in school, but I will have to add an additional class onto that. Yeah.
Okay. Add an additional class or an additional
I'd
semester?
have to take that capstone sometime because I can't graduate without that. So, but that would add time to
I'm going to stop you.
taking that.
We're taking everything down, and so we need to you not talk over each other.
Oh, I'm sorry.
So if you could just kind of, and the attorneys and I are the worst offenders, so don't take it personally. But if you can just try and be cognizant of that,
Sure.
that'd be great. Mr. Nelson.
Thank you, sir. I apologize. What I'm asking is in terms of so you're already scheduled to take a class in the next semester. Is that in that same semester that you've already added on, could you take that capstone class?
I could.
Okay. So you're already extending your college career, so to speak, by a semester. This wouldn't require you to add yet another semester onto the tail end?
No, most likely not. Most likely not.
Okay. And I understand that you wouldn't want to do that, but you said this is your civic duty and you would make it work.
I would be able to do that, yes.
Okay. And so, ultimately the question is would it be a undue burden to you to have to do that?
No, I don't believe so.
Okay, fair enough. So I'm going to ask you a few questions just kind of generally, and then get to know you a little bit better, and then we'll move into some specific questions on your questionnaire, if that's okay. So if you and I were to meet in a different circumstance, what are a couple of things I'd learn about you in our first conversation?
I enjoy getting tattooed. That's pretty clear. As if I'm wearing a T-shirt, you'd see a bit
Right.
better. I really like art, things like that. My grandparents were artists, so was my mom. I like rugby. It's kind of an odd sport. Not a lot of people know a lot about it, but I play that currently at St. John's where I go. I'm a college student.
Okay.
Yeah.
We're gonna we want to try to protect your anonymity as best we
sorry.
can. No, that's okay. Just so you know, rather just my college and stuff.
My college, yeah. Okay.
All right. So you had obviously heard about this case before you learned about your jury service.
Correct.
And how did you feel when you learned that you were a prospective juror in this case?
I was shocked a little bit.
Why?
I wondered why me, but then again, I guess anyone could. And watching the video in the other room, hearing that it's random, I assumed it was random. I just thought, what are the chances? Because there's so many people,
Right. Did you go ahead?
I felt since I was young, I'm younger than, and it seemed odd to me that someone in my age would be even considered. I guess I've never thought about this, so it seemed interesting, but I read all the stuff and I was like, okay, well, this is really happening. So,
Okay.
yeah.
Did you have any concerns for your personal safety, COVID-19 concerns, anything of that nature?
I did wonder a lot about how we've talked about. There's a lot of media coverage of this and what my aspect, how I'd be portrayed, if at all. But we've made that pretty clear that I'm meant to be anonymous.
Okay. Now, ultimately, at some point, and this would happen when the court deems it safe to do so, your name may be released publicly.
Mhm.
Right? Are you aware of that?
I am now.
Okay. How does that make you feel?
Not nervous.
Okay.
I'm comfortable with that.
Fair enough. Can you think of a time, whether it be in your personal life, your work life, or your educational life, where you've been called upon to kind of resolve a conflict between two people?
Yeah, so I help out at the bar I work at sometimes, and as people enjoy their libations, they tend to get a little antsy sometimes. And so, yeah, breaking up a fight is definitely something I've had to do quite a few times, specifically at work.
Okay.
So, yeah.
What about more just like an argument?
Right.
Not necessarily where alcohol is involved, just two people are having a debate and they turn to you and they say, juror number 111, how do we get through this?
Yeah, I live in a house with some roommates, so there's quarrels sometimes about small things, big things, whatever.
Okay.
But yeah, I mean, I'm not always the mediator for that or the problem solver of it, but yeah, every once in a while we all kind of rely on each other to help figure this out, because two sides, someone needs to kind of
Right.
figure it out.
So when you are called and when you are the mediator, right? Because ultimately that's your job here in this case, if you were a juror in this case, is to essentially mediate a dispute on a very large level between the state of Minnesota and Mr. Chauvin, but also within the deliberation room you may have to mediate some disputes. What are the tools that you would use or employ to help mediate a dispute?
I always find that it's it's best to hear both sides because people see things their own way a lot of the time, and so it's easy if in front of each other they can say their piece out loud and realize what the difference is, and then I try and be a little unbiased with that because maybe I like roommate one better, but if they're wrong, they're wrong, and that's for my opinion to like kind of make. So I try and just use as many of the facts as I can and just reason it as simply and unbiasedly as possible. But then again, sometimes someone's just not making sense and it's really hard to use any of their arguments, so I just kind of have to say, well, nope, you lose this one.
Okay.
We're going to go with them.
Fair enough. Do you think it's different if you're personally involved in the dispute?
Absolutely.
Okay. What's different about it?
If I have a stake in it, then I want it to end up some way. I kind of have an outcome in my mind already that would be beneficial to me or not beneficial to me. So if I have that stake, I'm definitely going to try and push my side. It's sometimes hard to realize how much of a stake you have in something and to try and push back and be like, well, maybe I should try and be a little more unbiased about this or a bit more objective.
Sure. So, I mean, ultimately, like you're in the jury deliberation room, right? And there's a couple of different scenarios. One scenario is two sides are having a dispute over some, two sides are having a dispute over some piece of evidence, some rule of law, whatever it is, and you're kind of observing it versus having a dog in the race, so to speak, right? Mm-hmm. So how would you approach it, outside of a living environment? Like, this is as you mentioned, it's a big case.
Right. Well, definitely kind of like how I had said earlier, hearing both sides and trying to put together, like, we're trying to come to an agreement on something. We all have to agree. That's the way it's going to work. So I think just talking it out more and more and more, obviously, not like getting to an argument, but just continuing to say what someone thinks and why they think it, because the why is just as important as the what. There's a reason that's pushing everybody. So figuring that out kind of can help understand why someone thinks something can maybe help change that idea.
Okay.
I don't know if that answers the question.
It does, and articulately, thank you. How about a situation where you've been called upon to determine if someone's telling you the truth? Can you think of a situation in your life where you've had to decide, is this person telling me the truth?
Sure. I'll use the bar example again. I bounce there sometimes, just sit at the door and make sure, especially now we have capacity, so just keeping that, in check. But someone gives you a fake ID. It's clearly fake. I mean, that's, one thing. But talking to that person, maybe I don't know. Say I'm unsure, but the way that they're acting and just how, if you can look me in the eyes and just rationally talk to me, just very calm, I have no reason to doubt you. But if you give me this is probably all right, but you're shaky, whatever. Body language says a lot, and so I think that's what I use to judge people's truthfulness.
Do you think that two people can be observing the situation, the same situation, and perceive it in a different way?
Yes. So, like a different angle, a different aspect. You see something maybe I just don't. Or maybe I'm trusting because the very first thing you said to me. I immediately trust you. Maybe I don't have reason to trust because they see something else.
Okay. So they may see a different detail that the other person saw?
Mm-hmm.
Do you think that our personal backgrounds and life experiences affect how we perceive events?
Yes.
How do you see that happening?
So, in my life specifically, or just generally?
Generally.
Generally, I mean, the things you grow up around kind of dictate how you see the world. And if you see the world in maybe a cynical way, it's easy to be very cynical about the rest of life. Whereas if you grow up in a very optimistic and positive environment and things are shown to be, like, don't give up on something, then you're probably going to not give up on something so easily later in your life. Whereas if you're taught to quit immediately if it's too hard, you're probably going to carry that for the rest of your life. So, yeah.
Okay. Can you think of a situation in your life where you've been 100% convinced of something only to later learn you were wrong?
Yes.
How do you handle that? What's your approach to that?
It's really hard to be proven wrong and like accept that. I found this a lot in classes. I take classes on like, well, it's called peace studies. So, you know, race, things that deal with like conflict. And to be shown that, oh, I've not been thinking about this right my whole life, it's really hard to accept that if someone's pushing that on you. Whereas if they just kind of introduce it to you and allow you to recognize that, oh, I was wrong, has been easier for me to kind of accept that I've been wrong about this. Well, better do the work to make sure I'm right about it now.
Right. Okay, fair enough. Last kind of general question is ultimately you understand you have to sit through this trial. You have to take only the evidence that is entered into trial into account, and you ultimately are what's called a judge of the facts, right? You decide what did or didn't happen. The judge will give you the law, and you may read the law, and you may think that the law is crazy. You may think it needs to be changed. You may have a strong opinion about the law. But the question becomes, can you listen to the facts in this case and apply the law as the judge gives it to you, even if you think it's wrong or should be changed?
Yeah, so obviously it's impossible to be completely unbiased, but the way that this seems to operate is there's some very strong framework. You have facts and the law, and that's it. So seeing that, having that in front of you, in front of me, would be really easy to just take that. There's nothing else. Just ignore everything else but this. It's right in front of you. That's all you have. I think that would be not the most difficult thing, to just accept these small things in front of you.
So I'm going to just follow up with some questions on your questionnaire, because you obviously have some fairly strong opinions, right? Is that a fair statement?
Sure.
Can I ask, what does your mask say?
It's the bar that I work at.
Oh, gotcha.
suppose
I didn't
could
want to
flip it around.
identify it. I just couldn't see if
Yep,
it had
just some
message.
words.
Okay. So you were asked, you obviously, when you filled this out, you had heard of the case. And you were asked to kind of recite what you knew or what you had heard about this case, right? And before I kind of get into this, I want to ask you about, there's some reference to a video or videos in the questionnaire and in your responses. And I want to make sure we're talking about the same video or videos. You understand there was a bystander who took a video of Mr. Floyd's arrest that went viral, became international news, essentially, right? And then throughout the course, or since that time, there have been some body-worn cameras from the officers that were released publicly. There were some like footage from area stores that was released. Have you seen which videos have you seen?
I'm aware of all the videos, but I've seen and watched to completion just the bystander video. I've like seen snippets of some of the body cam stuff, but not like sat down and fully just watched it out, because I tried to not focus more on that after being summoned.
Fair enough. So, but the bystander video, you say, did you get it through social media?
Yeah, so I think the first time it was shared to me on Facebook, and I just hardly use Facebook, but I think it was some person I'd known in high school was like, look at this. And I saw it, I was like, oh, and then just kind of talking with it, it blew up, it was viral. So everyone's kind of talking about this, so we all tend to watch it in passing, not in passing, maybe just like at the bar showing it, or in class, hey, did you see this?
Right.
That would be my experience with it.
And so it's fair to say that on a college campus, it's a fairly hot topic.
Sure, yes.
And the same thing in the bar you work in, people are kind of talking about it. And
What's new in the world?
Yeah.
Right.
And then do you pay much attention to like the news media as well? And have you seen snippets on the news?
Yeah, some of it's they show whatever they show, but I don't tend to watch TV news very often, if ever.
But like you may be scrolling through whatever social media platform.
Scrolling through a feed. Sorry.
That's okay. My fault too. You may see like someone shared it and it kind of automatically starts playing. You watch a couple seconds of it, you scroll past, right? Okay. So you were asked to write down what you know about the case, and I want to just read what you wrote, if that's okay, and then ask you a few follow-up questions on it. You say, I remember seeing the video of Chauvin kneeling on Floyd's neck. It was sent to me a few times by friends, but I only watched it through once. I went to a few protests after it happened and remember the goal was to have the officers charged and fired, and a few days later they were. I saw the YouTube video of one of the officers getting yelled at some grocery store. So in terms of your decision to go to the protest after it happened, again, it's fair to say that you formed an opinion about what should happen to Mr. Chauvin.
Correct.
And again, I don't discount, I don't negate your opinions, but can you honestly say that you can set aside, I mean, you went to a protest where you were asking for Mr. Chauvin to be arrested and charged with a crime. Can you honestly say that you can be a fair and impartial juror in this case?
Yeah. This is bigger than me and anyone really. Giving those facts and just having them there, I can put aside what's happened in the past, the opinions I've formed, because they're not important to what's actually factual and the proceedings of this.
Okay. You were asked about your opinions as to both your general impression, I should say, as to both Mr. Chauvin as well as Mr. Floyd. And what you wrote is that you had a somewhat negative opinion of Mr. Chauvin, and that when asked why, you wrote, well, a person died while they were present, and it seems like they caused the death. So cause of death is a legal issue that has to be determined by the jury. Mm-hmm. The question becomes is, you formed an opinion or you formed an impression that Officer Chauvin and or the others caused Mr. Floyd's death.
Correct.
And again, it seems to be a pretty strongly held opinion, right? So you understand that you may hear evidence, right? You may hear medical evidence, you may hear people come in and testify about what did or did not cause Mr. Floyd's death. Can you set aside what you previously believed to be the cause of his death and listen to that evidence, honestly?
It's kind of like what we discussed earlier. An opinion is meant to be changed.
Okay. You were asked about your impression of Mr. Floyd, and you said somewhat positive. His image his image has sparked lots of debate over police brutality and racism in America, and he was killed with his face in the street. I mean, again, your answer about your impression about Mr. Floyd implies that his death was caused by these police officers, right? Mm-hmm. And again, it's okay. The honest, I don't know what's in your heart. I have to take your words at face value, right? Mm-hmm. And there are some people who will say anything they can to get off of a jury, and there are some people who will say anything they can to get on a jury, right? And you're going to protests, you've got these opinions, and ultimately, can you honestly say, I can set all of my beliefs aside, right? And I can judge this case on the evidence alone?
I'd like to think I could.
Okay. You were asked about your sharing your opinions with family, friends, coworkers, discussing it online. Did you ever post anything on social media about Mr. Floyd?
I don't believe so.
Okay. So there was conversations, those conversations or opinions were conversations between family members, friends, coworkers. And you wrote, the police used excessive force and their conduct, my copy cuts off, and their conduct I can't read this word, but it says, to the way black men are treated in America. So you're linked. So again, excessive force. You made an opinion that the force you observed in these videos was excessive, right?
Correct.
And that this was somehow indicative of how black men are treated by police in America, right? Mm-hmm. It's a political opinion. It's a political view. You're entitled to it. The question just really honestly becomes, again, we have to be intellectually honest with each other, right? Can you set aside your political opinions that this was excessive force, that these officers caused this death? And can you neutrally judge this case?
I believe I could.
Right. Because here's the problem, right? In this country, every criminal defendant is presumed innocent. What that means at the beginning, they are presumed innocent. And it's the state that has to convince you that the defendant is guilty. That's the burden of proof. My concern, on behalf of my client, is that we're not starting at that spot. I have to somehow convince you, first and foremost, that he is innocent. And then maybe you'll change your opinion. Do you see the concern?
I do, and it makes a lot of sense. In terms of this whole process, like you said, presumed innocent, yeah, until proven guilty. So, were I to be a part of this and start, it sounds weird, but just having to mentally just wipe and start from there.
Control, Alt, delete, right?
Exactly, and you're right. It would seem that it necessitates something on your part to prove to me something, right? But I believe that in how this all is meant to work, like we've talked about, the facts are right there. It's all you have. Your opinions don't mean anything anymore. They can't help you here. Let's use these facts and create an opinion together.
Okay.
Is how I see this.
Right. I mean, and that's again, under our system of law, as you were asked in this questionnaire, is Mr. Chauvin doesn't have to testify. We don't have to ask a single question. We don't have to introduce a single piece of evidence. We don't have to call a single witness, right? And the beginning point is still the presumption of innocence. And ultimately, the government still has the burden of proof beyond a reasonable doubt. And you can apply that.
I believe so.
I have to press you. I'm not trying to be confrontational. It's not a I believe so or I'm going to try. It's a yes or a no.
Yes.
And you attended a rally and you carried a sign at that rally?
Yeah.
And that sign said no justice, no peace?
Correct.
Ultimately, you were also asked a question as to whether or not you believe your community has been negatively or positively affected by the protests that have taken place in the Twin Cities area since George Floyd's death. And you wrote that it has had a socially positive effect that have strengthened the movement for racial equality while exposing racist institutions and practices. Do you hold the belief that police officers are racist?
Not inherently, no.
Okay. Do you believe that that police officers or police departments engage in systematic racism?
I think we have to be a bit more specific because police officers is a very blanket term. That's everyone that is like serves the law. I don't think like overall, yes, every police officer has this about them. I think that some police officers are in a position to use racism to reinforce racism.
Okay. Do you think that specifically about the Minneapolis Police Department?
Not as a whole.
Right. Do you think that as applied to specific officers within the Minneapolis Police Department?
Yes.
Do you believe that to be the fact with respect to Mr. Chauvin?
I'm unsure.
Okay. So again, right, coming back to this presumption of innocence. So, I mean, you formed at least some question in your mind as to whether or not Mr. Chauvin was acting out of a racial bias, right? And you're saying that you can set that aside, those perceptions or those questions, and judge this case exclusively on the basis of facts in this case.
Yes.
Mr. Nelson, I was thinking of breaking for the afternoon. Would
That's fine, Your Honor.
does that fit? Okay, we're going to break until 3:45. We've been going at it a while.
Sure.
And so if you could wait back in that courtroom we'll bring you back at 3:45. adjourn and such.